They say death has a way of clarifying things. When Alpha Reinhardt's blade pierced my chest that frozen December night, when my blood painted the snow crimson beneath the pale moon, I understood with perfect clarity that I had been a fool to love him, a fool to trust the mate bond one felt burning in my soul, a fool to believe that weakness could ever be forgiven in a world ruled by strength. But here's what Reinhardt didn't understand as he watched the light fade from my eyes. Death isn't always the end. Sometimes it's a chrysalis. Sometimes, the weak return as something the strong should have learned to fear. Before we begin this tale of betrayal, resurrection, and vengeance written in the stars themselves, do me one favor. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story has more twists than a mountain pass, and you won't want to miss a single revelation. And tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug, because we're about to journey together through darkness, blood, and the terrible beauty of fate's ironclad will. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when I was still Liesel, just Liesel, the smallest omega in the Schwarzwald Pack, the weakest link in a chain that prided itself on being unbreakable. I was born under an unlucky star, or so the pack elders muttered when they thought I couldn't hear. My mother had died bringing me into this world, hemorrhaging too much blood. Her omega constitution too fragile to withstand the birthing. My father, a mid-ranking warrior named Otto, had looked at me with disappointment from my very first breath. Where other omega children showed early promise, quick healing, keen senses, the subtle power of emotional influence, I showed nothing but frailty. I was smaller than the other pups. Lower. When the children played at hunting in the forests surrounding our territory, I could barely keep up. My wolf, when she finally emerged during my 13th year, was a pitiful thing. A wisp of silver fur and trembling limbs that could barely sustain a transformation for more than a few minutes before I'd collapse, exhausted, back into my human form. The Schwarzwald Pack had no use for weakness. We were descendants of the old Germanic warrior lines, wolves who had fought beside Arminius against the Roman legions, who had survived the 30 Years' War, who had endured when lesser packs had been absorbed or annihilated. Strength was our creed. Power was our prayer. And I was neither strong nor powerful. But I had one thing, one single luminous truth that kept me breathing through the contempt and the casual cruelty. I had Reinhardt Wolf, the Alpha's son, the heir to the Schwarzwald Pack, the most magnificent wolf I had ever seen, with hair like burnished bronze and eyes the color of amber held up to firelight. He was everything I was not, tall, powerful, commanding. When he entered a room, the very air seemed to rearrange itself around him, acknowledging its master. And he was my fated mate. I had known it from the moment of my 18th birthday, when the mate bond snapped into place with such force it drove me to my knees in the middle of the pack gathering. The golden thread that connected my soul to his was so bright, so undeniable, that I had gasped aloud, searching the crowd for him with desperate eyes. I had found him standing beside his father, Alpha Friedrich, his face carefully blank. But I had seen it. Just for a moment I had seen the recognition flare in his amber eyes. He had felt it too. The bond. The unbreakable connection that the moon goddess herself had forged between us. My heart had soared. How naive I was. How catastrophically, fatally naive. You see, Reinhardt had other plans. He had been courting Brunhild, the daughter of the neighboring Eisenberg Pack's Alpha. Brunhild was everything an Alpha's mate should be. A strong omega from impeccable bloodlines, beautiful and fierce, with a wolf that could fight alongside the warriors if needed. Their union would strengthen both packs, create an alliance that would make the Schwarzwald territory unassailable. And then there was me, Liesel. Weak, worthless Liesel, with my fragile wolf and my common blood and my unfortunate tendency to faint during pack runs. Reinhardt had a choice to make. Honor the mate bond, the sacred connection that the moon goddess had created, or reject it in favor of political advantage and personal ambition. He chose ambition. But rejection wasn't enough for him. You see, a rejected mate bond doesn't simply disappear. It lingers, a painful reminder, a thread that can be felt even if it's been severed. As long as I lived, I would be a living testament to the bond he had refused. An embarrassment. A weakness in his armor. So Reinhardt decided I needed to disappear entirely. It happened on the night of the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. The pack had gathered for the traditional hunt, and I had been ordered to participate despite my limitations. It was meant to be a test, I think now. One more opportunity for me to prove my worthlessness to any who might have harbored sympathy for the rejected Omega. The hunt had ranged far into the deep forest, where the ancient trees grew so thick that even the moonlight struggled to penetrate. I had fallen behind as I always did, my small wolf form struggling through snow that came up to my chest. The sounds of the pack had grown distant, and then disappeared entirely, until I was alone in the winter darkness. That's when Reinhardt appeared. He emerged from the shadows in his human form, naked as wolves are when they shift, his perfect body unmarred by the cold that made me shiver. His amber eyes held no warmth, no recognition of the bond that still sang between us despite his rejection. "Liesel," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a condemnation. "You've become a problem that needs solving." I had stared at him, my wolf form trembling, not yet understanding. Hope, pathetic, desperate hope, still flickered in my chest. Perhaps he had come to reconsider. Perhaps he had felt the bonds pull as acutely as I had, the way it ached and burned in my chest every time I saw him with Brunhild. "Shift," he commanded, using his alpha voice, the one that compelled obedience. I had no choice. My wolf melted away, leaving me naked and vulnerable in the snow, my human body even more fragile than my wolf form. I wrapped my arms around myself, teeth chattering. "Reinhardt," I whispered. "Please. I never asked for this. I never asked to be your mate. Can leave. I can go to another pack far away where I'll never—" "No," he interrupted, and there was something final in his tone. "You misunderstand. There is no far away for you, Liesel. The mate bond is permanent, cannot be transferred or forgotten. As long as you live, you'll be a chain around my neck, a reminder of weakness, a vulnerability that my enemies could exploit." The truth had crashed over me then, cold as the snow beneath my bare feet. "You're going to kill me." He had smiled then, and it was the most terrible thing I had ever seen, empty of mercy, empty of regret. "I'm going to do what's necessary for the pack, for my future. Surely even you can understand that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of one weak Omega who contributes nothing of value." I had tried to run. My human form, weak as it was, had tried to flee into the darkness. But Reinhardt was an alpha, trained in combat since childhood. He had caught me within seconds, his hand closing around my throat, lifting me off my feet. "I'll make it quick," he said almost gently. "That's more mercy than you deserve for being born." And then he had drawn the silver blade, the ceremonial dagger that every alpha heir carried, and he had driven it into my chest, just left of center, piercing my heart. The pain had been indescribable. Not just the physical agony of dying, but the metaphysical torture of the mate bond shattering. It felt like my soul was being torn in half, like every good thing I had ever felt was being ripped away and replaced with a void of absolute suffering. I had fallen to the snow, my blood spreading around me in a dark pool, steaming in the frozen air. Reinhardt had stood over me, watching to make sure I died. I remember thinking through the haze of pain that this was wrong. Not just morally wrong but cosmically wrong. The moon goddess did not make mistakes. If she had bound us as mates, there had been a reason, a purpose that Reinhardt was destroying with his ambition. My last coherent thought before the darkness took me was a prayer, not for salvation but for justice, for retribution, for the universe to set right what had been broken. And then I died. Or at least I should have died. Death, I learned, is not always a door that closes. Sometimes it's a door that opens onto something else entirely. I woke on a stone altar in a place that was not quite earth and not quite spirit realm. The sky above me swirled with colors that had no names, and the air hummed with a power that made my teeth ache. I sat up, gasping, my hand flying to my chest where the wound should have been. There was nothing. No scar. No pain. Just smooth, unblemished skin. "Liesel." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonant with ancient power. Daughter of the moon, child of sorrow, you have been wronged. I turned, and there she was, the moon goddess herself, radiant and terrible, her form shifting between woman and wolf and something that was both and neither. Her eyes held the light of 1,000 full moons, and when she looked at me, I felt seen in a way I had never been seen before. You died because a man valued power over fate, she said. Because he believed himself wiser than the ancient ways. Because he thought himself strong enough to defy my will. Then why? I whispered, my voice breaking. Why did you make him my mate if he would only destroy me? Her smile was sharp as broken glass. I did not make him your mate to bring you happiness, child. I made him your mate because his thread was woven with yours for a purpose. Purpose he rejected. A purpose that must still be fulfilled. She moved closer, and I could feel the power radiating from her like heat from a forge. Reinhardt Wolf sought to make himself stronger by destroying his weakness. But in doing so, he has ensured his own destruction. For I am sending you back, Liesel. Back to the world of the living. Back with gifts that will make you everything he feared you could never be. I don't understand, I said. You died weak, the goddess said. You will return strong. Strong enough to stand as his equal. Strong enough to be his judge. Strong enough to be his executioner, if that is what justice demands. She reached out and touched my forehead, and power exploded through me like lightning through a copper wire. I screamed as my body remade itself, as strength I had never known flooded into muscles and bones, as my wolf, my poor, pitiful wolf, erupted into something magnificent and terrible. You will return as his fated mate, the goddess said, her voice echoing in the void. The bond cannot be broken, even by death. But you will also return as something more. As my instrument. As my vengeance. And Reinhardt Wolf will learn too late that fate cannot be denied without consequence. The world dissolved around me, and I was falling through layers of reality, through the membrane that separated death from life, until I woke in the forest. It was spring now. Months had passed, though for me it had seemed like only moments. The snow had melted, and green shoots pushed up through the earth where my blood had soaked into the ground. I stood, and immediately I knew that everything had changed. My body was different, taller, stronger. When I looked down at my hands, I saw that they were marked with silver lines, runic symbols that glowed faintly in the dawn light, marks of the moon goddess's favor. And my wolf, oh my wolf. I shifted, and it was effortless like breathing. My wolf form exploded outward, and instead of the small, trembling creature I had been, I was magnificent. My fur was silver-white, luminous in the morning sun, and my body was powerful, sleek, perfect. I could feel the strength coiled in my muscles, the sharpness of my senses. I could hear a rabbit's heartbeat 100 yards away. I could smell every wolf in the Schwarzwald Pack's territory, could identify them individually by scent alone. I was no longer the weak Omega. I was something new, something the pack had never seen before. I made my way through the forest, moving with a grace and speed that astounded me. The journey that would have taken me hours before now took mere minutes. When I reached the edge of the pack's central settlement, I stopped and shifted back to human form. I needed clothes. That was a problem. But as I stood there considering, I noticed something strange. The runic marks on my skin were glowing brighter, and mist seemed to be gathering around me, condensing into fabric. Within moments, I was dressed in a simple tunic and leggings, woven from what looked like moonlight itself. The goddess's gifts were more comprehensive than I had realized. I walked into the settlement with my head held high. It was early morning, and wolves were beginning to emerge from their homes, preparing for the day's work. The first person to see me was Helena, one of the pack mothers who had always looked at me with pity. She stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth falling open. "Liesel," she whispered, disbelief and fear mingling in her voice. "But you're dead. Reinhardt said you were killed by rogues during the hunt." So that was the story he had told. Of course, I had been erased, my murder covered up with a convenient lie. I'm not dead, I said, and my voice was different too. Stronger, resonant with power. I'm very much alive. Word spread through the settlement like wildfire. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered, wolves staring at me with shock and confusion, and in some cases, fear. I could smell their emotions, another new gift, the acrid scent of their anxiety, the bitter tang of their guilt. They had believed I was dead. They had accepted Reinhardt's story without question. Not one of them had investigated. Not one of them had demanded justice for the weak Omega who had disappeared. And then he appeared. Reinhardt, striding through the crowd with Brunhild at his side. His face a mask of shock that was almost convincing. Almost. Our eyes met, and the mate bond, which I had thought destroyed, flared to life between us with such intensity that we both staggered. But it was different now. Before, it had been golden and warm, full of promise. Now it was silver and sharp, edged with something that tasted like vengeance. Liesel, he breathed, and I heard the fear in his voice. But he should be afraid. Hello, Reinhardt, I said softly. I've returned from the dead. We have so much to discuss. His alpha aura flared, an instinctive attempt to dominate, to force me into submission. But I was no longer the weak Omega who could be cowed by an alpha's presence. The moon goddess's power flowed through me, and when I pushed back with my own aura, the crowd gasped. My aura was silver and cold, radiant with divine authority. It didn't just match Reinhardt's, it surpassed it. I watched his eyes widen as he felt it, as he understood what I had become. Impossible, he whispered. Nothing is impossible for the moon goddess, I replied. She sent me back, Reinhardt. She sent me back to fulfill the purpose you tried to destroy. She sent me back to show you what happens when an alpha thinks himself above fate. Brunhild stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. This is some trick. Some illusion. The Liesel we knew was weak. She couldn't challenge a pup, much less an alpha. I turned my gaze to her, and she flinched. The Liesel you knew died with a silver blade in her heart, murdered by her own fated mate because he valued political alliance over the moon goddess's will. I am what she became in death and rebirth. I am what the goddess made me. I raised my hands, and the runic marks blazed with silver light. The crowd fell back, some dropping to their knees. They could feel the divine power radiating from me, undeniable and absolute. I call for a pack conclave, I announced, my voice carrying across the settlement with supernatural clarity. I call Alpha Friedrich, his heir Reinhardt, the elders, and all warriors to the judgment circle. We have matters to address, crimes to answer for. Reinhardt found his voice. You have no authority to call a conclave. You're not even pack anymore. You disappeared. I was murdered, I interrupted, and my voice cracked like a whip. I was murdered by you, Reinhardt Wolf, for the crime of being your fated mate. You drove a silver blade into my heart and left me to die in the snow because my existence inconvenienced your ambitions. And now I have returned to demand justice. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Some looked at Reinhardt with dawning horror, others with disbelief. But I could see in their faces that they sensed the truth. The mate bond between us was visible now, a silver cord that connected us even as it writhed with pain and broken promises. Alpha Friedrich pushed through the crowd, his powerful frame still imposing despite his age. He looked at me with calculating eyes, then at his son. These are serious accusations, girl. Do you have proof? I have the mark of the goddess, I said, showing him the runic symbols that glowed on my skin. I have the mate bond that even death could not sever. And I have the testimony of the earth itself, which drank my blood on the winter solstice night. Would you like me to take you to the place where I died? The ground is still stained with it. Silver blade wounds bleed differently, Alpha Friedrich. You know this. The old Alpha's face tightened. He was no fool. He could see what I had become, could feel the power that emanated from me. And he knew that if what I said was true, his son had committed one of the gravest sins a wolf could commit, murdering a fated mate. The conclave will convene at moonrise, Friedrich said heavily. All will be judged fairly. Will they? I asked softly. Will the weak Omega receive fair judgment from the pack that never valued her? Will the Alpha heir face real consequences for his crimes? Or will power protect him, as it always has? I am still Alpha of this pack, Friedrich growled, his own aura flaring. And I will see justice done. I inclined my head. Then I will await your justice, Alpha. But know this, the moon goddess is watching. And if your justice fails, hers will not. The hours until moonrise were tense. I was given quarters in one of the guest houses. They were afraid to let me roam freely, but also afraid to try to confine me. I spent the time meditating, communing with my wolf, marveling at everything I had become. My wolf spoke to me now in full sentences, her voice clear and strong in my mind. They fear us, she said with satisfaction. As they should. We are death returned. We are vengeance embodied. We are also justice, I reminded her. The goddess didn't send us back merely for revenge. There is a purpose here. A larger purpose. Then we will fulfill it, my wolf agreed. And if that purpose includes watching Reinhardt Wolf pay for his crimes, all the better. When moonrise came, I made my way to the Judgment Circle, an ancient stone amphitheater in the heart of the pack's territory, where disputes were settled and justice was dispensed. Torches blazed around the perimeter, and the entire pack had gathered, hundreds of wolves watching with fearful, fascinated eyes. Alpha Friedrich sat in the judgment seat, with the pack elders flanking him. Reinhardt stood in the center of the circle, his face carefully neutral, Brunhild beside him looking defiant. And I stood opposite him, the mate bond stretching between us like a silver chain. We are gathered to address the accusations brought by Liesel against Reinhardt Wolf, Friedrich began, his voice formal. Liesel, you claim that my son murdered you on the winter solstice night. You claim he did so to escape the mate bond. Present your evidence. I stepped forward, and the torchlight caught the runic marks on my skin, making them glow. I present 3 pieces of evidence. First, the mate bond itself, which all here can see and feel. A bond that Reinhardt felt and rejected when it formed on my 18th birthday. Ask him if he denies feeling it. All eyes turned to Reinhardt. He was silent for a long moment, then said reluctantly, I felt it, but I chose not to act on it. That is an alpha's right. To reject a mate bond, yes, I agreed. Not to murder the mate who bears it. Second, I present the location of my death. I held out my hand, and silver light flowed from my palm, coalescing into a 3-dimensional image of the forest clearing where I had died. The snow. The blood. The tracks that showed exactly what had happened. The crowd gasped at the casual display of power. Illusion magic was rare, requiring immense skill and strength. Third, I continued, I present the weapon. I looked directly at Reinhardt. You used your ceremonial silver dagger, the one engraved with your family crest. Unless you've disposed of it, it will still carry traces of my blood. Silver blade wounds leave a residue that can be detected even months later. Reinhardt's face had gone pale. Friedrich's eyes narrowed. Reinhardt, present your ceremonial dagger. For a moment I thought Reinhardt might refuse, might run. But he was trapped by pack law and tradition. Slowly, he drew the dagger from his belt and held it out. One of the elders, a woman named Hildegard who was skilled in forensic magic, took the blade and examined it carefully. Her face grew grave. There is blood residue, she announced. And she cast a spell, and silver light flowed over the blade, revealing a pattern. It matches her blood signature. This weapon was used to kill Liesel. The judgment circle erupted. Wolves howled in shock and anger. Some were angry at Reinhardt, others at me for bringing this shame on the pack. Friedrich raised his hand for silence, his face like stone. Reinhardt Wolf, he said, and his voice was heavy with disappointment. What do you say to these accusations? Reinhardt stood tall, unrepentant. I did what was necessary for the pack. The mate bond was a mistake. Liesel was weak, useless. She would have been a liability as my Luna. I made the hard choice that an alpha must make. I put the pack's needs above my own. You put your ambitions above the moon goddess's will, I countered. And in doing so, you brought her wrath down on all of us. Do you not see? I was returned not just to accuse you, but to show you what you could have had. What you destroyed. I let my power flare. Let them all feel the magnitude of what I had become. I was weak because I was meant to be tested. To be forged in hardship so that when I came into my power, I would be strong enough to stand beside an alpha. Strong enough to lead. But you couldn't see that. You saw only my present weakness, not my potential strength. And now you will face the consequences. Friedrich's voice cut through the tension. The evidence is clear. Reinhardt, you murdered your fated mate. By pack law, this crime demands exile or execution. But I held up my hand. No, pack law is not sufficient here. This is a matter for the moon goddess herself. And she has given me her judgment. The runic marks on my skin blazed with brilliant silver light, and when I spoke, my voice echoed with divine authority. Reinhardt Wolf. You sought to escape your fate by destroying it. Instead, you have bound yourself to it more tightly than ever. The mate bond cannot be broken, even by death. You will feel it every day for the rest of your life, a constant reminder of what you threw away. The silver cord between us pulsed, and Reinhardt gasped as pain flashed across his face. I had sealed the bond, made it permanent and unbreakable. He would never be able to mate with Brunhild or anyone else. He would be tied to me forever, feeling the connection but unable to complete it. Furthermore, I continued, you are hereby stripped of your position as heir. The moon goddess does not permit kinslayers and mate murderers to lead her children. You will spend the rest of your days as an omega, the lowest rank you so despised. You will know what I knew, the contempt, the dismissal, the casual cruelty, and you will understand too late what you destroyed. Friedrich stood, his aura flaring with anger. You cannot strip my son of his rank. I am Alpha here. And I am the moon goddess's instrument, I replied, meeting his anger with cool certainty. I do not usurp your authority, Alpha Friedrich. I enforce divine law. If you contest this judgment, take it up with the goddess herself. But know that I am her voice in this matter. For a long moment, the old Alpha and I stared at each other, wills locked. Then, slowly, he bowed his head in submission. He had no choice. To defy me was to defy the goddess herself. And no Alpha, no matter how powerful, could do that. I turned back to Reinhardt, who stood frozen, his amber eyes wide with shock and the beginning of understanding. You wanted to be free of me, I said softly. Instead, you will be tied to me forever. You will feel what I feel. When I am happy, you will know it, and it will be agony because you cannot share in it. When I am in pain, you will feel it, and you will know you caused it. This is your punishment, Reinhardt Wolf. Not death. Not exile. But life, long life, tied to the mate you tried to murder. I turned to address the pack. I will not stay in the Schwarzwald Pack. I have been dead to you for months, and I will remain dead. But know that the moon goddess watches. And she does not forget when her children are mistreated, when the weak are culled instead of protected, when power is valued above compassion. Change or face her wrath. And then I shifted, my magnificent silver wolf bursting forth, and I ran. I ran from the judgment circle, from the pack that had never valued me, from Reinhardt and his eternal punishment. I ran into the night, into the forest, into the freedom I had earned through death and rebirth. Behind me, I felt Reinhardt collapse to his knees, feeling the mate bond stretch but never break as I put distance between us. He would feel me for the rest of his life, would know where I was, what I was doing, would feel the ghost of my emotions through our connection. He had wanted to be rid of me, and instead I had become his constant companion, his eternal reminder, his living punishment. Justice, I had learned, was not always about death. Sometimes it was about life, and the exquisite torture of living with your mistakes forever. I ran through the night and into the dawn, and my wolf sang with joy, with power, with the freedom we had earned. We were no longer the weak Omega. We were the goddess's instrument. We were judgment and mercy, vengeance and justice, death and rebirth. We were everything Reinhardt had feared I could never be. And he would feel it every day for the rest of his life. Months passed. I made my way through the territories of a dozen packs, never staying long, always moving. Word spread of the silver wolf marked by the moon goddess, of the Omega who had been murdered and returned as something greater. Some packs welcomed me with reverence. Others feared me and barred their borders. I didn't care. I was searching for something, though I didn't know what. Purpose beyond revenge. A reason for everything I had been through. I found it in the ruins of the old temple, deep in the mountains where few wolves ventured. The structure was ancient, predating even the oldest packs, built when wolves still openly worshipped the moon goddess and magic flowed freely through the world. In the temple's heart, I found an altar, and on that altar, a prophecy carved in stone. When the weak return as strong, when death births new life, when the rejected becomes the judge, then shall the old ways be restored. The marked one will rebuild what was broken, will teach what was forgotten, will lead the lost back to the light. I traced the words with trembling fingers, and understanding crashed over me. This was why. This was the purpose the goddess had mentioned. I wasn't just meant to punish Reinhardt. I was meant to change everything. The wolf packs had lost their way. They had become obsessed with physical strength, with power and dominance, forgetting that true strength came in many forms. They had forgotten the old ways, when Omegas were revered as emotional anchors and healers, when packs were families rather than militaries, when the goddess's voice was heard and heeded. I was meant to remind them, to rebuild, to restore. And so I did. I began gathering wolves, not just Omegas, but all those who had been cast aside by the strength-obsessed packs. The weak, the different, the rejected. I taught them what the goddess had taught me. That weakness could become strength, that every wolf had value, that diversity made a pack stronger, not weaker. We built a new pack in the shadow of the old temple. We called it Silver, Moon Silver, and we lived by the old ways. Omegas were cherished, not despised. Different abilities were valued equally. And the moon goddess's wisdom guided our every decision. Word spread. More wolves came, seeking refuge, seeking purpose, seeking a pack that would value them for what they were rather than punish them for what they weren't. And Silver grew. Through it all I felt Reinhardt. The mate bond stretched between us like a silver thread, and I knew he felt everything I built, every triumph, every joy. I knew it tortured him, knowing what we could have created together if he had only trusted in fate rather than fighting it. Sometimes I pitied him. Sometimes I hated him. But mostly I simply acknowledged him, the shadow in my past that had made my present possible. And then, 3 years after my return, he came. I was in the temple gardens, tending to the moon lilies that grew there, when I felt him cross into Silver territory. The mate bond flared with his proximity, and my wolf stirred, uncertain whether to feel joy or rage. He appeared at the garden gate, and I almost didn't recognize him. The proud alpha heir was gone. In his place stood a hollow-eyed man who looked like he had aged a decade in 3 years. His clothes were simple, worn. His hair, once carefully groomed, was shaggy and unkempt. And his eyes, his beautiful amber eyes, held a pain so deep it made my breath catch. "Liesel," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "I came to. I don't know why I came." I stood slowly, setting down my gardening tools. "The mate bond drew you. It's been calling you for years, hasn't it? Making you restless. Making you ache." He nodded, his hands clenching into fists. "Every day. Every hour. Feel you, Liesel. Your happiness. Your purpose. Everything I destroyed. Everything I could have had." "Yes," I said simply. He fell to his knees and tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry. I know it means nothing. I know it can never be enough. But I am so sorry. You were right. About everything. I was a fool. I valued the wrong things. I destroyed something precious because I was too blind to see its value. I walked closer, looking down at the man who had killed me, who had thought himself above fate. Why did you come, Reinhardt? What do you want from me? Forgiveness, he whispered. Or death. I don't care which. I can't live with this anymore. Bon. The knowledge of what I did. What I lost. Please, Liesel. End this. Me. Use your power. The goddess gave it to you for a reason. I studied him for a long moment. The goddess had given me the power to be his executioner. It was true. I could end him with a thought, could stop his heart with a whisper. It would be justice. It would be right. But as I looked at him, broken and hollow, I realized something. Death would be a mercy. A release from his suffering. And he didn't deserve mercy. Not yet. Maybe not ever. No, I said softly. I won't kill you, Reinhardt. He looked up at me, hope and despair warring in his eyes. You will live, I continued. You will live and feel the mate bond every day. You will live and know what you destroyed. You will live and watch from afar as I build something beautiful from the ashes of your cruelty. That is your punishment. That is your execution. Not of your body, but of your pride, your ambition, your belief that you knew better than fate. Please, he begged. I can't. You can, I interrupted. Because you must. The goddess's judgment is not complete. You have years left to serve, Reinhardt. Years of knowing what you threw away. And maybe, at the end of those years, if you have truly learned, truly changed, maybe then we can speak of forgiveness. But not today. I turned away from him, back to my garden, dismissing him. Go back to the Schwarzwald Pack. Live your life as an omega. Learn humility. Learn compassion. Learn what it means to be powerless in a world that values only power. And when you have truly understood, not just intellectually, but in your bones, in your soul, what you did to me, then perhaps we will speak again. I heard him sob behind me, a broken sound that the mate bond carried directly into my heart. Hurt. Even now, even after everything, his pain was my pain. That was the cruelty of the mate bond. It made us feel each other's suffering whether we wanted to or not. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't afford to. Mercy had to be earned, not given freely to those who had murdered and lied and destroyed. After a long moment, I heard him stand, heard his footsteps retreat, felt him leave Silber territory, the mate bond stretching thin but never breaking as distance grew between us once more. My wolf whimpered in my mind. He suffers. Yes, I agreed. He should. As we suffered. But the bond aches, she said. It wants completion. It wants healing. Then it will ache, I replied firmly. Some wounds should not heal quickly. Some lessons should not be learned easily. The years continued to pass. Silber flourished. We became known throughout the wolf territories as a place of refuge and renewal, where the old ways were honored and all wolves were valued. Other packs began to change, influenced by our example. The rigid hierarchies softened. Omegas were treated with more respect. The goddess's wisdom was sought once more. And through it all I felt Reinhardt, living his punishment, enduring the contempt that I had once endured, learning slowly and painfully what he had done. I heard stories about him from travelers who passed through Schwarzwald territory. How he had accepted his demotion without protest. How he served the pack in the lowest capacities, cleaning, serving, doing the work that no one else wanted. How he never complained, never argued, never tried to reclaim his former status. How Brunhild had left him, disgusted by his fall from grace. How Alpha Friedrich barely acknowledged his existence. How the pack that had once celebrated him now treated him as I had once been treated, as something contemptible, barely worth noticing. Part of me took satisfaction in this. Part of me felt the old wounds finally beginning to scab over, knowing that justice was being served. But another part of me, the part that was tied to him through the mate bond, that felt his growing humility, his genuine remorse, his slow transformation, that part whispered that perhaps punishment had its limits. That perhaps there was a point where justice became cruelty, where righteous anger became unrighteous vengeance. I tried to ignore that whisper. Tried to focus on my work, on building Montsilber, on helping the wolves who came to us seeking healing and purpose. But the whisper grew louder with each passing season. 5 years after my return from death, I received a visitor, Alpha Friedrich himself. He came alone, without guards or ceremony, looking older and more tired than I remembered. I received him in the temple hall, where moonlight streamed through the ancient windows and the air hummed with sacred power. "Liesel," he said, inclining his head with respect that he had never shown me before. "Or should I say Alpha Liesel? I hear that's what your pack calls you." "I prefer just Liesel," I replied. "I lead because the goddess called me to, not because I desire power." "But you didn't travel all this way to discuss titles, Alpha Friedrich. Why are you here?" He was silent for a long moment, his weathered face troubled. "I came to speak about my son." My heart clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about him?" "He's dying," Friedrich said bluntly. "Not physically. His body is healthy enough. But his spirit, Liesel, he's fading. Day by day I watch him diminish. The mate bond is killing him slowly, and he refuses to fight it. He says it's what he deserves." I felt it then, through the bond, the hollow emptiness that had been growing in Reinhardt. I had attributed it to his punishment, to his transformed circumstances. But Friedrich was right. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of despair that eroded a wolf from the inside out. "He made his choices," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "He did," Friedrich agreed. "And he has paid for them. 5 years as an Omega. 5 years of humiliation and hardship. 5 years of feeling your joy while drowning in his own misery. How much longer must he pay, Liesel? How much punishment is enough? You ask me this," I demanded, old anger flaring. "You who stood by while he murdered me. You who would have let him get away with it if I hadn't returned. Now you want mercy for him." Friedrich bowed his head. "You're right. Failed you. I failed to see your value. I failed to protect you. I failed to raise my son to honor the goddess's will. These are sins I will carry to my grave. But I am asking you, as one alpha to another, to consider this. The goddess sent you back to be his executioner if necessary. But she also sent you back as his fated mate. Both things are true. Both things matter." He looked up at me, and I saw genuine anguish in his eyes. "If you want him dead, kill him. End it quickly. That would be kinder than this slow dissolution. But if there's any part of you that remembers the mate bond's promise, any part that wonders what you could have been together, then perhaps it's time to offer him a chance at redemption. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just a chance." After Friedrich left, I sat in the temple for hours, wrestling with the question he had posed. My wolf was no help. She was as conflicted as I was, torn between the memory of our death and the pull of the mate bond. Finally, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I reached out through the mate bond, deliberately, consciously, and I felt for Reinhardt. What I found horrified me. He was a shell. The proud, arrogant alpha I had known was gone completely, but nothing had grown to replace him. There was just emptiness. A void where a person should be. He was existing, not living. Breathing, not thriving. And he was doing it deliberately, punishing himself far more harshly than I ever could have. He was letting himself die, not through any physical means, but through sheer spiritual attrition. He was willing himself out of existence, convinced that his continued life was an insult to me, to the goddess, to everything he had destroyed. In that moment, I realized something that shocked me. I didn't want him dead. I had thought I did. I had told myself that his suffering was justice, that his punishment was deserved. And it was deserved. But somewhere along the way, without realizing it, my desire for vengeance had been replaced by something else. Something more complex. I didn't want him dead. I wanted him redeemed. I wanted him to become what he should have been all along. A worthy mate, a good alpha, a man who honored the goddess's will. I wanted the promise of the mate bond fulfilled, not destroyed. But that would require something from me that I wasn't sure I could give. It would require me to open myself to him again, to risk being hurt again, to trust that his transformation was real and lasting. Could I do that? Should I do that? I took the question to the temple's heart, to the altar where I had first understood my purpose. I knelt there and prayed, seeking guidance from the goddess who had remade me. And she answered. Not in words but in visions. I saw the future branching before me like a river splitting around a stone. In one branch I maintained my distance, and Reinhardt faded into nothingness, and the mate bond became a chain of bitterness that I dragged through the rest of my life. In another branch I went to him, offered him a chance at redemption, and risked everything on the possibility that people could truly change. The first path was safe. The second was terrifying. But the goddess had not sent me back for safety. She had sent me back to restore what was broken. And Reinhardt, damaged, humbled, transformed Reinhardt, was as broken as anything I had encountered. If I truly believed in redemption, if I truly believed that the weak could become strong and the lost could be found, then I had to extend that belief to him. Even if it hurt, even if it terrified me, even if it meant risking my heart again. The goddess didn't demand it. She simply showed me the paths and let me choose. I chose the harder path. The next morning, I left Mondsilber in the capable hands of my beta, a wolf named Gisela who had been one of the first to join our pack. I made the journey to Schwarzwald territory alone, my heart hammering with each step. I found Reinhardt in the pack's communal kitchens, washing dishes. He didn't notice me at first, focused on his work with the kind of mindless concentration that comes from trying not to think. He had aged more than 5 years should account for. There were lines around his eyes and mouth, and his bronze hair was shot through with premature gray. "Reinhardt," I said softly. He dropped the plate he was washing. It shattered on the floor, but he didn't seem to notice. He turned to me slowly, as if afraid I was a hallucination that would disappear if he moved too quickly. "Liesel." His voice was barely a whisper. Why are you here?" "I came because you're dying," I said bluntly. "And I find that I don't want you to die." Confusion and hope and fear chased across his face. "I don't understand." "Neither do I entirely," I admitted. "But I understand this. The goddess sent me back for a purpose. I thought that purpose was just punishment, just justice. But it's more than that. It's about restoration, healing, taking what was broken and making it whole." I stepped closer, and he held perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might scare me away. "You broke something precious, Reinhardt. You broke the mate bond. You broke me. You broke yourself. And for 5 years I've let you suffer for it. But suffering alone doesn't heal anything. It just creates more brokenness." "What are you saying?" he asked, and I could hear the desperate hope in his voice. "I'm saying that I'm willing to try. Not to forgive. I'm not ready for that, and I may never be. But to try. To see if what was broken can be mended. To see if the mate bond can become what it was meant to be, instead of a chain of mutual suffering." Tears streamed down his face. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve a chance." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But the goddess doesn't deal in what we deserve. She deals in purpose and potential and the possibility of transformation. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave the Schwarzwald Pack. You're going to come with me to Mondsilber. And you're going to spend the next year serving the pack. Not as an alpha, not as my mate, but as the lowest omega, just as you've been doing here." His eyes widened. "You want me to come to Mondsilber? I want you to learn what I built from the ashes of your cruelty," I said. "I want you to see what a pack can be when it values all its members, not just the strong. I want you to serve those you once would have dismissed as worthless. And after a year, if you have truly learned, truly changed, truly become someone who could be a worthy mate, then we'll discuss what comes next." "And if I fail," he whispered, "then the mate bond remains broken, and you return here to live out your days and the consequences of your choices." I said simply. But at least we will have tried. At least we will know that redemption was offered, even if it couldn't be accepted. He fell to his knees before me, and this time it wasn't the defeated collapse of our last meeting. It was something else. Humility, yes, but also determination. "Oh, I will not fail," he said. "I swear to you, Liesel. I swear to the moon goddess. I will become worthy of this chance. I will become worthy of you." "We'll see," I said. "Words are easy. Actions are what matter. Now get your things. We leave within the hour." Taking Reinhardt to Montsilber was one of the hardest things I had ever done. My pack was confused, then angry, then bewildered when I explained who he was and what he had done. Many argued against allowing him to stay. He was a murderer, a mate killer, someone who represented everything Montsilber stood against. But I stood firm. We preach that the weak can become strong, that the lost can be found, that redemption is possible. If we don't extend that belief to everyone, even those who have hurt us most grievously, then our words are hollow. Reinhardt will serve among us as an omega. He will be treated as any omega is treated, with respect for his work, but without privilege. And we will see if he can become what he should have been. Gisela pulled me aside later. "Are you sure about this? He killed you, Liesel. Killed you. How can you bear to have him here?" "Because the alternative is letting bitterness poison the rest of my life," I replied. "Because the mate bond ties us together whether I want it or not. Because the goddess sent me back not just to punish, but to heal. And because part of me wants to see if the bond was right all along. If there was a reason we were fated together that goes beyond his crime and my death." Gisela looked at me with understanding and concern. "Just promise me you'll protect yourself. Don't let hope make you vulnerable to being hurt again." "I promise," I said. "I'm watching him carefully. One misstep, one sign that his remorse isn't genuine, and he's gone." But Reinhardt didn't misstep. He worked harder than anyone in the pack, taking on the dirtiest, most difficult jobs without complaint. When others mocked him, and they did especially in the early days, he absorbed it with grace. When they tested him, trying to provoke his old alpha pride, he remained humble. I watched him carefully, waiting for the mask to slip, for the old arrogance to resurface. But it never did. Instead, I saw something else. I saw him begin to understand. One day, I came upon him in the healing house, sitting with an elderly omega named Dietrich who was dying. Dietrich had been rejected by 3 packs before coming to Montsilber, cast out because his useful years were behind him. He was bitter and angry, lashing out at anyone who tried to care for him. But Reinhardt sat with him for hours, listening to his stories, his complaints, his rage. And when Dietrich finally broke down, sobbing about how worthless he felt, how the world had convinced him he had no value, Reinhardt held him and wept with him. "I understand," I heard Reinhardt say. "I understand what it is to be told you're worthless, to be treated as less than nothing. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry that I contributed to a world that made you feel this way." Dietrich died peacefully 2 days later, holding Reinhardt's hand. I realized then that Reinhardt's transformation wasn't an act. He wasn't performing remorse to win me back. He was genuinely, fundamentally changed. The proud alpha who had valued power above all else was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true strength lay in compassion, in service, in recognizing the worth of every soul. The mate bond began to change between us. The sharp, painful edge softened. It was still damaged, still broken in places, but it was healing. Slowly, tentatively, like a bone knitting itself back together. 6 months into his year of service, I found myself seeking him out. Not to test him or watch him, but simply to be near him. The bond was pulling us together again, but it was different now. Before, it had been all heat and instinct. Now it was something deeper, more conscious, more earned. We began to talk. Really talk. About what had happened. About why he had made the choices he had. About what he had learned. I was taught that strength was everything. he told me one evening as we walked through Monsilber's gardens. From the time I could walk, my father drilled it into me. The strong survive. The strong lead. The weak are liabilities. I never questioned it. I never thought about what we were losing by believing that. And now, yes, now I know that strength comes in many forms. That the emotional strength to endure contempt is as valuable as the physical strength to win battles. That wisdom and compassion and kindness are not weaknesses to be purged, but strengths to be cultivated. He looked at me with those amber eyes, now humbled and aware. You tried to show me that. The goddess tried to show me that. But I was too arrogant to see it. It took losing everything, my status, my pride, my mate, to finally understand. Do you regret it? Yes. Killing me. Or do you just regret the consequences? He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. I regret every second of that night. Not because of what it cost me, but because of what it cost you. You died afraid and in pain, betrayed by the one person who should have protected you. That is a sin I will carry forever, Liesel. Even if you forgive me someday, even if the bond heals completely, I will never forget what I did to you. It will always be part of who I am. A reminder to never let pride blind me again. I believed him. I could feel the truth through the mate bond, could sense that his remorse was genuine and bone deep. The year is almost over, I said softly. You've proven yourself. You've changed. You've become someone I can respect, if not yet fully trust. So now we have to decide. What comes next? He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and took my hand. His touch sent electricity through the mate bond, a reminder of what we could be together. What do you want to come next? He asked. I considered the question carefully. What did I want? Justice had been served. Redemption had been offered and accepted. The mate bond was healing. But did I want to complete it? Did I want to be not just his fated mate, but his chosen mate, his partner, his equal? I want to try, I said finally. Not to go back to what we might have been, that's impossible. But to go forward to something new. Something built on honesty and respect and genuine partnership. Something that honors both what was broken and what has been healed. He lifted my hand to his lips, kissing it gently. I would like that. More than I can say. But Liesel, if you ever doubt me, if you ever fear me, if the memory of what I did becomes too much, tell me. I will walk away. I will spend the rest of my life alone if that's what you need. I will not let my desire for you hurt you again. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the difference. Before I had hoped and trusted blindly. Now I knew. I had seen him tested and transformed. I had felt the change through the mate bond. I knew he was genuine. We took it slowly. Over the following months, we courted each other properly. Something we should have done from the beginning if he hadn't been so blinded by pride and I so cowed by weakness. We learned each other. Not the mate bond's idealized version, but the real, complicated people we actually were. I learned that Reinhardt had a gift for strategy, but also for understanding people's emotional needs. That he was patient and thoughtful when he wasn't performing arrogance. That he had a quiet sense of humor and a love of old stories. He learned that I was stronger than even I had realized, not despite my ordeal but because of it. That I had a gift for healing not just physical wounds but spiritual ones. That I took joy in small things. Morning sunlight, the smell of rain, the sound of pack children laughing. And slowly, carefully, the mate bond completed itself. It happened on a full moon night, a year and a half after I had brought him to Monsilber. We were in the temple, standing before the altar where I had first understood my purpose. The entire pack had gathered to witness, along with representatives from a dozen other packs who had heard the story and wanted to see its conclusion. I stand before the moon goddess, I said, my voice strong and clear, to complete the mate bond that death interrupted and pride nearly destroyed. Reinhardt Wolf, do you accept me as your mate? Not because fate chose me but because you choose me? Knowing all that I am, all that I have been, and all that I will become. I do, he said, and his voice rang with certainty. I choose you, Liesel. Not for your power, though you are powerful. Not for political advantage, though our union strengthens both our packs. I choose you because you are my equal and my better, my teacher and my mate, the one who showed me what it means to truly live. I choose you because the moon goddess was right all along. And I choose you, I replied. Not because I have forgiven everything. Some wounds leave scars that never fully fade. But because you have proven yourself worthy of a second chance. Because you have become the man you should have been from the beginning. Because together we can be what the mate bond always promised. Not just lovers, but partners in healing a broken world. The moon goddess's presence filled the temple then, palpable and powerful. Silver light surrounded us as the mate bond snapped fully into place, no longer broken or damaged, but whole and bright and strong. Reinhardt gasped as he felt it, the full force of the connection, unimpeded by pain or guilt or distance. And I felt him fully for the first time. His soul laid bare before mine, and I saw that he was genuine. He was truly, fundamentally changed. We completed the mating ceremony there, before the goddess and the pack, and when it was done, we were no longer two separate beings tied together by fate. We were partners. Equals. A mated pair who had earned each other through trial and transformation. The celebration lasted 3 days. Wolves came from across the territories to witness the impossible. The murdered mate and her killer, reconciled and united. Some saw it as weakness, others as foolishness. But most saw it for what it was. Proof that redemption was possible, that the broken could be mended, that the goddess's will could not be thwarted, only delayed. Alpha Friedrich came, tears streaming down his weathered face as he embraced us both. "Thank you," he whispered to me. "Thank you for saving my son. Not from death, but from himself." "Thank the goddess," I replied. "She's the one who made this possible." In the years that followed, Reinhardt and I led Montsilber together. He never tried to reclaim the Alpha title. That remained mine, earned through death and rebirth. Instead, he served as my partner and advisor, using his strategic mind and his hard-won wisdom to help the pack flourish. We taught others what we had learned. That strength comes in many forms. That pride is a poison. That the weak should be protected, not culled. That redemption is always possible, even from the darkest sins, if the desire to change is genuine. And slowly the wolf world changed. Other packs began to adopt the old ways. Omegas were treated with respect. Diversity was valued. The goddess's wisdom was sought. The brutal hierarchy that had dominated for generations softened, became more humane, more compassionate. It wasn't perfect. There were packs that resisted, that clung to the old philosophy of strength above all else. But they became the exception rather than the rule. And through it all, the mate bond between Reinhardt and me grew stronger. Not the naive, untested bond of our first meeting, but something forged in fire and blood and transformation. Something that had been broken and remade stronger for the breaking. We had children eventually. 3 pups who inherited my connection to the goddess and Reinhardt's strategic mind. We raised them to understand that power without compassion is tyranny, and compassion without power is helplessness. We taught them the old ways and the hard lessons we had learned. And every year, on the anniversary of my death and rebirth, I returned to that clearing in the forest. The place where I had died. The place where everything had changed. Reinhardt always came with me. We would stand together in silence, remembering. Not to wallow in the past, but to honor it. To acknowledge what had been broken and what had been healed. To remind ourselves never to take our bond for granted. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked me once, years into our mating. "Giving me a second chance. Completing the bond. There are days when I still can't believe you did it." I considered the question carefully. Did I regret it? "No," I said finally. "I regret what you did to me. I regret the fear and pain and death. Those are things I will carry forever. But I don't regret choosing redemption over vengeance. I don't regret believing that people can change. 'Cause you did change, Reinhardt. You became the mate I needed, even if it took death and resurrection to make it happen." He pulled me close, and I felt the mate bond hum between us, strong and whole. "I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice," he said. "I promise you that." "I know," I replied. "And that's why it was the right choice." The goddess had sent me back with two purposes: to be Reinhardt's executioner, or to be his salvation. In the end I had been both. I had executed the proud, arrogant alpha who thought himself above fate. And I had saved the man who could emerge from those ashes, humbled, changed, and finally worthy of the mate bond the goddess had forged. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. And there were still days when the old wounds ached, when I remembered the cold and the pain and the betrayal. But there were more days filled with joy, with purpose, with the satisfaction of seeing what we had built together. Not just our mating but Silber, the changed wolf world, the living proof that redemption was possible. And that, in the end, was the greatest vengeance of all. Not destroying Reinhardt but transforming him. Not letting bitterness consume me, but using my pain to create something beautiful. Not remaining the weak Omega I had been, but becoming the powerful, purposeful woman the goddess had always intended me to be. Reinhardt had tried to kill the weak Omega because he saw her as an obstacle to his ambitions. But I had returned as his fated mate and his executioner, and in the end, his salvation. And that was a story worth dying for, worth living for, worth everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think about redemption, justice, and the power of second chances, then hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire. Share this with someone who needs to hear that transformation is possible, that the broken can be mended, and that fates cannot be denied, only delayed. And drop a comment telling me what you thought. Was Liesel right to give Reinhardt a second chance, or should some sins be unforgivable? I want to hear your thoughts. Remember to tell me what city you're watching from so I can send you a virtual hug, because we've been through quite a journey together, haven't we? Until next time, remember, weakness is not the opposite of strength. It's often the chrysalis from which true strength emerges.